Hello and welcome back to the Biochemistry for Health Sciences channel. In today's video, we shall look at how cells make as well as utilize ATP. As we mentioned in the previous video, your cells, your 30 trillion cells that you have in an adult human body has to make ATP at all times. So it doesn't matter what state you are in, postprandial or after a meal, whether you're in early starvation, sleeping 2 o'clock in the morning, or you are in late starvation, it doesn't matter what state we are in, we always have to generate ATP because we do not store ATP in our body. So we make ATP, the more we use it, the more we have to make it. So energy or ATP is extremely important for cells to survive. We need energy to do mechanical work such as movement, like muscle contraction, cellular movement, or the movement of cilia. We need energy for joining atoms together, bond formation, and this is very important for biosynthesis. We need energy for all kinds of transport in and out of the cell, transport in and out of the organelles such as nucleus and so on. And we also need energy to make ion gradients, which are very important also for transport as well as for functions of neurons. As a reminder, the figures and material that have been used in these videos are mostly from this book, Medical Biochemistry, Molecule to Disease, and that's available at this site. So how do the cells in our body make ATP? So there are 4 major ways by which we make ATP. So these are oxidative phosphorylation, substrate-level phosphorylation, the use of the enzyme creatine kinase, and the enzyme adenylate kinase. So let's look at these different ways of making ATP. So most of the ATP in cells, except for the red blood cells, most ATP in cells is made by oxidative phosphorylation. So here ADP and PI react in the presence of energy to form ATP, and this is carried out by the enzyme ATP synthase, and this is the location of this enzyme in the mitochondria. So red blood cells do not have mitochondria, therefore they cannot do oxidative phosphorylation, but any cells that have mitochondria and have sufficient oxygen, they will get most of their ATP through oxidative phosphorylation. There are some cells in the body that require a lot of energy, a lot of ATP. And these cells, usually you can see under a microscope, they have a lot of mitochondria. So when you see a lot of mitochondria in a cell, it means that the cell needs a lot of energy. So examples of cells where you see a lot of mitochondria, the cells that need a lot of energy are type 1 muscle fibers, neurons, as well as cells that are actively synthesizing proteins and then secreting the proteins, such as your plasma cell or your beta lymphocyte that synthesizes antibodies. So this process is called oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative because we require oxygen. Only if oxygen is present can we do this synthesis via oxidative phosphorylation. The second way to make ATP is called substrate-level phosphorylation. Substrate-level phosphorylation. And this is found in all cells. All cells can do substrate-level phosphorylation. So in this case, the energy to make ATP is coming from a substrate that has a lot of energy. So these are very highly unstable substrates. They have a lot of energy. So in this example, a phosphorylated substrate reacts with ADP to give you ATP and some product. And we can see an example of this here in reaction 7. So we can see this 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is a highly unstable substrate, very rich in energy. It can react with ADP to give us ATP. Okay, so substrate level phosphorylation generates ATP, so we get ATP. And the other product we get here is 3-phosphoglycerate, which is much more, what you call X here, which is much more stable compared to 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. So the point here is the energy is coming not from oxygen, as in the previous case in oxidative phosphorylation. Here the energy is coming from the substrate, from a high energy substrate. So in this case, the phosphate is given to the ADP to give you your triphosphate. In the second example, second type of substrate level phosphorylation, the phosphate is coming from inorganic phosphate or PI. So the phosphate is being transferred here to give you a high energy ATP equivalent, in this case GTP. So that example is shown here in Krebs cycle. You can see the formation of GTP by reacting GTP and PI. So this means here succinyl-CoA is converted into succinate. Okay, so succinyl-CoA is converted into succinate. So substrate level phosphorylation, where the energy to make, here's another example, the energy to make ATP is coming from substrates that have high energy, unstable substrates such as 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate here. We make ATP, and phosphoenol pyruvate is another high energy substrate, unstable substrate, and again we make ATP here. And then we have this type of substrate level phosphorylation shown by this reaction in Krebs cycle. So we have oxidative phosphorylation, number 1, and then we have substrate level phosphorylation, number 2. So these are two ways that your cells use to make ATP. In muscles, there is another way to make ATP besides oxidative phosphorylation and substrate level phosphorylation, and that is the use of the enzyme creatine kinase, very rich in muscles. So in this case, there's a high energy chemical called phosphocreatine that reacts with ADP, and we get ATP and creatine. So this is what we see especially in muscles, and it's catalyzed by the enzyme creatine kinase. So here the high energy compound is phosphocreatine. So this is in a way quite similar to the substrate level phosphorylation system. In muscles, this is part of the phosphagen system of generating energy. The fourth way of generating ATP is by the use of the enzyme adenylate kinase, and this is found in many cell types such as kidney cells, liver cells, cells of the heart, as well as in the skeletal muscles. This enzyme adenylate kinase basically makes ADP react with inorganic phosphate PI to give you ATP, to give you energy, and the other product is AMP, adenosine monophosphate. So these are the four ways by which cells synthesize or make ATP energy. Oxidative phosphorylation, substrate level phosphorylation, the use of the enzyme creatine kinase, and the enzyme adenylate kinase. So how is ATP utilized? The most common way by which we utilize ATP is this. By the formation, ATP is broken down into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, releasing energy. Now, inorganic phosphate may be released, or this phosphate may be combined to the substrate to give you a phosphorylated product. So, for example, if you look at this reaction here that uses ATP, the glucose reacts with ATP. This phosphate of the ATP is transferred to the glucose to give you glucose 6-phosphate, and what you get is ADP. So in this case, PI inorganic phosphate is not released. Instead, the phosphate becomes part of the product, glucose 6-phosphate. So this is a very common way by which ATP is used here. Here's another example where the ATP is converted into ADP. Very common way of using ATP. Another way to break down ATP when we use ATP is the adenosine triphosphate is not broken down into diphosphate, but it's broken down into monophosphate, AMP, and this gives us pyrophosphate or PPI. Of course, this will give you energy, and when the pyrophosphate breaks down by itself, it will give you even more energy. So this is less common, and here's an example. This is in the breakdown of fatty acids. So when we break down fatty acids, there's a reaction here where the ATP is broken down to give you adenosine monophosphate and pyrophosphate. Okay, so this is a less common way. This is more common, this is less common. Okay, that's all for now. We will have more metabolism videos in the near future. Until the next video, have a wonderful day.